Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, we will be discussing the new Dennis Lehane TV series on Apple TV Plus, a series called Smoke. Big reunion here for the talent involved here in this show. Very successful with Blackbird last year, 2 years ago, I guess it was now, and coming back with this show, Smoke. The audience, I should say, the critical reaction has been a little mixed on this. And Darren and I actually recorded last week our thoughts about episode 1 and 2. And because of the holidays and because of the coverage of The Bear, which of course is a priority, that's a massive success, global success. And very curious to see if Darren's caught up on that as well. But because of that, we had a couple of episodes around that and finally getting around to discussing Smoke. So I'll insert that conversation that I had with Darren last week into the conversation, and then of course covering all the way up to episode 3, the most current episode, which I've just watched right now after my return from vacation. Before we get to all of that, some other things we've been watching. Darren, one thing that we both watched and have discussed offline a couple of times or via text, which is you saw F1. What'd you think of that?
I did, yeah. G'day there, Victor. F1, yeah, I really liked F1. I'm a big F1, I'm not a big F1 fan, but I follow it. I watched it last night. It was the British Grand Prix last night. The Australian Oscar Piastri got a 10-second penalty and ended up second, which I'm a little bit angry about. But there's plenty of penalties in this sport that I don't understand. Yeah, what a thrill seeing F1 the movie in the cinema.
F1 trademark the movie. They changed the title to put the TM in there. So
just incredible. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. It's a massive advertisement for F1.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And for IWC watches and for all the sponsors that they have in this fake team that they've created for Brad Pitt to drive around. Now, yeah, we've chatted a little bit offline about the character of Brad Pitt.
Yes.
And I'm trying to see it the way that you explained it to me. But yeah, he's pretty thin on the ground.
Yes.
And I was really wanting more about this character other than he's the best driver that you've you has never got to the top just yet. But in terms of the cinematography, the music by Hans Zimmer, I think, the whole thrill ride that the director Kaczynski creates is so worth seeing in the cinema. And I'm actually probably going to see it again before it disappears.
Yeah, I mean, I know you. I saw your Letterboxd gave it 3 stars. I gave it 4. And I to be totally honest, it was very interesting to have this experience of seeing this movie and also having seen just the week before 28 years later, which is, it's just something about movies, which of course there's something ineffable where it either works for you or it doesn't. So for example, just recently had another conversation about 28 years later and how it did not work for me. And someone saying they had this incredible emotional connection to Jodie Comer's character's journey, which I won't spoil here, of course, but we have a whole conversation about it, and how I just it didn't emotionally hit me. And I assume if you're locked in, it just works. And that's a perfect example. I could nitpick F1. There is some terrible dialogue. There is some ridiculous boilerplate stuff that happens in it. And I think it actually is very smart in the way it's scripted. It's one of those, it does what a good blockbuster for me, I think, does, where you know what's going to happen next, but in a satisfying way, not in a generic way. And I'll actually talk about something that didn't work as well for me just the same week. But I was so locked in that, I couldn't wait. It's the film is giving me what I want incrementally, exactly. I want a little more about that person's backstory. I want the stakes to change. I want to understand. I'm not a F1 fan in the United States in general, not a lot of F1 fans, but it's I wanted to understand the sport a little better and what's the strategy. And then all of a sudden, me as a dummy who doesn't know anything about the sport, all of a sudden I catch on to what the strategy is. And then the movie does the thing I think it's going to do. And I'm like, oh, that's so fun. Right. So it just is. And it worked for me, in a way that, and obviously it's one of those things that I'm not saying this is some kind of work of genius. It's pretty obvious what it's trying to do. It's just very, very well made. And by the way, this is the same guy who made Top Gun Maverick, and Maverick I think is a better film and has a better script. But so much of what's satisfying about Maverick, I thought it was so smart. In Maverick, it's like they're saying they train for the mission, and they basically make you run the mission 20 times over the course of the film, so that you, as the audience, know exactly what the stakes are. And then, of course, like when the mission goes wrong or goes right towards the end, it's like you're all 100% know it's spoon feeding you basically, and then then twisting a little to the left when you expected it to go to the right. So anyway, it's just generic but very, very well made. And if the racing sequences in this movie weren't incredible, this movie would be terrible. But it's incredible. Oh, and another thing I wanted to add to that is, and once again, just whether something works for you or not, I've heard, you're not alone, I've heard people be downright critical of Brad Pitt, like he's doing a bad performance. I actually like this performance. I agree that he's not great when he's delivering the dialogue here. The dialogue, is a little rough for everybody, even some of these very talented actors. And he's not the type of person. I mean, I think Brad Pitt in general is not the type of person that you go to because he does great line readings. Whether it is this or whether it is in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's the physicality of his performance. And the closer he goes to being like Steve McQueen, who notoriously would cut as many lines as he could from the dialogue. I don't know if you know this about him, but McQueen would cut all his lines as much as he could from his script. And then if there was something that was expository, he would go to the director and go, have the other character say this. And he's just like, the less he talked, the more iconic he is in a way. And I think that Brad Pitt probably is learning that as he gets older. And I thought like it's a really good star performance for him because he works even though it's kind of silly. I agree completely.
But not only that, I mean, he's very authentic. He's in the cars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When he's driving the cars, I mean, with other Formula One drivers on the track. I mean, it is insane the way that they do so many of these shots that kind of pan from the cars next to him straight to his face. And you can see the pressure on his neck and his head as he's doing these corners, which gives so much authenticity to this film. And it puts you right there. And you really admire the guy for putting him in that kind of dangerous position. You got to be super skilled and you got to be fast to be able to keep those cars on the track.
What's your relationship with Brad Pitt in this later course of his life?
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day. We was talking about with some friends about Wolves, and I couldn't get through it, and they couldn't get through it either. So I think the last Brad Pitt movie I was truly into was that Tarantino Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Terrific.
Yeah, and he was incredible in that, and I think he's looking to play that character again.
Yes, David Fincher now apparently is just committed to Netflix. He is making this Tarantino script, and Tarantino has agreed upon it. And he's making it with Netflix, with Brad Pitt, and they're going into production very soon on it. Should be a huge hit, by the way, I would assume, by whatever metrics. If Havoc is a massive hit, I think 100 million people watch that movie. This is going to be way bigger than that, let's say. And and another big piece of news is, did you ever watch Mindhunter on Netflix?
Yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched enough episodes to appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really good and so unsatisfying that obviously if you've watched that show, especially if anybody who's seen all of it, there's always every episode basically starts with this moment where we're seeing the BTK killer in the United States and over the course of years, him basically developing his style. And it's a very creepy thing that's happening, that's developing over the course of the entire series. And of course, we never circle around to presumably that they would be eventually investigating BTK. And it is, this, kind of unfinished, even though the show seemed to have really good reviews and a good audience. But anyway, the news, everybody, is that apparently Netflix is negotiating with Fincher to make 3 Mindhunter movies to wrap up the storyline. So I guess he'll be working with Netflix for quite some time.
Very cool. That's going to be interesting to see him do a Tarantino script because Tarantino has a lot of comedy involved in his style, whereas Fincher seems to be very cold and calculated. So it'll be interesting to see how he can bring out the comedy, which Brad Pitt's character is very funny.
It's so weird that Tarantino is on board with this because he really loves Fincher as a director. However, you make a really valid point that Tarantino is willing to go from, very, very earnest, 1970s style, neo-realistic almost, to something like right out of a Hong Kong comedy or action movie, unlike Fincher, who is very funny. There's a lot of comedy in The Social Network. There's a lot of comedy in The Killer, for example. But like you said, his comedy is cold as ice. Like Gone Girl is very funny, but it is cold. It is not like, I can't imagine a sudden like whip pan where the actor turns to the camera. That is never going to happen in a Fincher movie, but it would easily happen in a Tarantino film. So it's going to be interesting to see these two very different styles come together.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And why is Tarantino not interested in making this?
Oh, this is a whole big digression. Tarantino is committed to not making more than 10 movies. So he was going to make a movie called The Critic. It was about Pauline Kael, supposedly fictionalized version of Pauline Kael, who he really admired. And then inside of that movie, she is reviewing this Brad Pitt film. And then as he was writing that script, he ended up getting more interested in the Brad Pitt character's film, the one that is basically a spinoff of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or supposedly this, like, let's say that there is an actual stuntman who has this reputation who actually made a movie at some point, and then she's reviewing it, and then there was a whole sections of the movie are included. So he wrote the entire movie, and he got really more interested in that. And then literally just as they were about to start making the movie, he was like, no, this is not what I want to be my final movie. So he threw out The Critic, and he threw out this other script as well. Neither one of these projects he wanted to make his final project. So now he's working on something completely different, apparently. But I guess the script made the rounds, and Fincher was like, I'd like to make that. And Tarantino, who's a Fincher fan, was like, great, let's do it. And I'm sure a lot of Netflix money came pouring into Tarantino's pocket as well. It's like $20 million or something for this script, just for the script, like $20 million. So it's, I'm sure he will go buy another. He owns two Hollywood theaters that he's refurbished to their original glory. And he has movie marathons there. And he owns two of them now. He bought one, now another, and he rehabs them. And then he basically has, he attends these screenings. And it's basically like what he used to do when he was just some film nerd who was broke, but now he does this in opulence. And they're very popular. They're very well attended. He watches everything's original 35 millimeter prints. And, I guess he'll go buy another movie theater now. He's got more than enough money to do it.
That's so cool. Wow.
That guy's living the dream, of course. The dream that we all had as film nerds when we were younger. That guy has done it all. Although he should just make more movies, man. Nolan is not like on some clock. It's like, I'll just make every 3 years. Nolan cranks out a movie, and it's always good, by the way. Good at worst, it's good. Sometimes it's great. And you know what? There'll be at least 10 great ones in all of, I'm sure Nolan will make 30 movies by the time he dies. Maybe not, maybe 20. But he's coming up past 10 already. Hey, another person who didn't care about churning out movies and has more than 10 great ones is Scorsese, right? He's like well past 20 movies.
Yeah, sure.
And he will have at least 10 classics under his belt when everything is said and done. So his fixation, Tarantino's, on ending at 10 movies is kind of ridiculous. But anyway. Okay. Anyway, the insanity of making this F1 film, which was so expensive to make, they shot these scenes. They stole these shots during the actual races over the course of like 2 years. So they would go onto the track in breaks with the actual other drivers. And you think about the risk involved to that. And, so I can't imagine what the insurance was on this, in case you actually crash into a driver and destroy the F1 race. Like what's the liability on that? But all of this was done practically, including, by the way, there's a huge car crash in this film. And I thought it's probably CGI or there might be like miniatures. It's an actual car that they crashed. And he was talking about how the car actually went off in an angle they didn't expect. And it really, you see how crazy this accident is. It's amazing that anyone would have survived it. There's no driver in the actual car when a stunt occurs. But the but it was like much more catastrophic than they expected the accident to be. But they actually wrecked the car to do that stunt, and it's just like it's insane. The complexity of this shoot in general, and you feel it. You feel it when you're watching it. I mean, I have to say that it's as simple as this. Every time someone was driving, I was grabbing onto my armrest. Like I had to pry my fingers off the armrest. And I saw this in IMAX, by the way. Oh, and that's the last thing I want to mention. I saw this in IMAX. We don't have an actual IMAX screen near us. We have LIMAX. We have a digital IMAX screen, like it's the size of an IMAX screen, but it's digitally projected. It's not film. And whenever I see something like I saw Oppenheimer on this screen, etc. But this is not shot in IMAX. It's shot with digital cameras, 6K cameras that are small enough to fit inside the cars. So, I mean, shot digitally and then projected digitally, this was like incredible. Like detail on the screen is insane, like how beautifully crisp everything was. And of course, everything in the movie looks great. The people look great. The cars look great. The clothes looks great. The jewelry looks great. Everything's just, it's like you said, it's like a promotion for this kind of conspicuous consumption.
Oh, it totally is, I was thrilled seeing the actual drivers in the film as
Yes.
well. I mean, Brad Pitt's standing up there for the national anthem for one of the races, and it just pans
And
across.
they're all around,
and you
right?
see Verstappen, you see Hamilton, and I was like, they're the superheroes. That's cool. That's really
Right.
cool to
Yep.
see them buy into this film. I mean, and you've got Ferrari and Mercedes bought into this film. They're embedded in it. So yeah, I mean, once you've got those two, you can do anything.
And it's funny too because I was so certain, given the box office for this was supposed to open around 30 or 35 here in the United States, even bigger overseas, obviously. But by the end of the weekend, they're like, "Oh, it's going to make 50 over the weekend." And by the end of that weekend, it had cracked. It was just shy of 60, so it was way bigger than they expected. And I'm like, "Oh, the word of mouth on this in the U.S. is going to be so off the charts that it's going to leg out." But maybe because this new Jurassic World movie totally overperformed over the weekend. It did well, but not like stupendous, here in the United States. But I just looked right now. I just read an article about the box office overseas, and this thing is having incredible legs overseas, where of course F1 is way more popular. This thing's going to be a huge, huge hit overseas, and I still think it'll leg out here in the U.S. I think it just kind of got dampened this week with the distraction of that Jurassic World movie opening, which I wanted to talk about also. I don't know if you saw the Jurassic World film by chance. Did you?
I have not seen it. No, I couldn't get anyone to want to come with me.
To go on is go. Apparently, I was surprised. I saw it with my daughter because we were off this week, and it was a very hot day, and we're like, well, let's go see something. And she didn't want to see one of the kids' films, so I'm like, do you want to see Jurassic World? She's watched the Jurassic World Chaos or Jurassic Park Chaos. And I said, do you think it's going to be scary for you? And she says, dinosaurs aren't real. I'm like, good point. Okay, let's go see it. And they put a lot of kids in peril, by the way, in this film. But the reason I mentioned earlier that there are things that work for you that could be a little generic. This is so generic. It is somebody mapping on the beats from the first Jurassic Park film onto this. The scale is much bigger than that first Jurassic Park film, but it's literally beat for beat the mapping onto that earlier script. So what you're going to get. You almost can predict the type of sequences you're going to have, but it's mostly real effective, and the special effects for the most part are really good. So if you are a fan of this genre and of this franchise, and apparently based on box office, this is still very popular. It made well over $300 million over the weekend, which is crazy. I can't believe this franchise just will not go away. You probably don't need anything beyond the first film, but they keep making $1 billion each. So I guess they're going to keep getting more of them. But it was, for what it is, it's not bad. The first, for me, there's a boat attack earlier on, maybe the first really big action sequence that goes on for a long time. It's almost half an hour between two different locations. And it is fantastic, and it looks fantastic. By the end of it, I was a little tired of it. I'm like, okay, more dinosaurs. Okay, I got it. And there's, of course, like these new, hybrid dinosaurs. And there's a really weird, like Frankenstein monster version of a dinosaur that pops up at the end. So it's, there is, that's all, whatever. It's fine. But yeah, that first attack, I think, is one of the best they've ever had in the show, in the film. And
Gareth Edwards.
Gareth Edwards.
Look, I do want to see it. it's just every week there's a new thing coming out. I think Superman's next week. I think
Mhm.
Fantastic Four's in a couple of weeks.
The
Like,
week after that, it's
you
crazy.
really have to
Yeah.
get yourself organized to see these things.
And that's a good segue, by the way, because we'll be talking about smoke. I'm not sure from a week to week basis how dense these episodes will be, but that gives us room to talk about other things we're watching, which, of course, are things that are premiering at home, like Sinners just premiered on Max. I do want to rewatch that because I didn't love it as much as everybody else did. And I almost want to experience it again to see if my expectations set lower, I might appreciate it more. So there's a lot that's premiering. Of course, it's summer, so there are things to watch at home. And of course, yeah, Superman this weekend, which is had huge pre-sales. It looks like it's going to be a huge success, at least on opening weekend. Very curious to see if James Gunn can pull it off. And then yeah, then we have the Fantastic Four, and then there's movies that I'm very much looking forward to that aren't necessarily blockbusters. Like Weapons is coming out, like Eddington is coming out. So there are some weirder
Yeah.
ones that are getting big summer releases. The type of movies that probably shouldn't get big summer releases. Sometimes those expectations are bad for those type of films. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I'm really curious to see between now and the end of August. And of course, in the middle of August, we have Alien Earth coming, which I can't wait for. So I'm very curious for that as well.
Oh, it's all happening. That's cool.
Oh, and one last thing to announce before we get into smoke is that Sona and I will be discussing another franchise extension that I'm probably not going to love that much, but we'll see. It could be entertaining in some ways. And I'm pretty sure you're going to watch this too, the new Dexter Resurrection, right?
Or maybe I'll watch the first one and see what happens.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I think everybody's going to do that at least, right? I don't know if I did not finish the original Sin series, but apparently
I watched a couple.
Yeah, I think
And
I got
it was so funny. I was
yes,
really entertained by it, but I
yeah,
didn't feel the need to go further. Once you see everybody as their younger version, I was
yeah.
like, that's great, hilarious, takes me back. And
I,
yeah,
it's what's so crazy about it is having a prequel season. I guess it kind of makes sense. Just like nostalgia play there. It fills in the calendar, waiting for the reboot to come along. But it did well enough where they're talk about beating a dead horse. They're making a sequel to that show. And I'm like, do we need another season of young Dexter? Like, what is going on? Like, we know what happens to him when he's older. Like, how interesting can these prequel seasons be? I mean, I don't know, but I am curious to see him in New York City with this in the sequel. So we'll see how that goes.
that's interesting because it's such a Miami-based show. So to
Yeah,
see him in a different city, that could completely change it. For a brand
yeah.
new audience or the exact same audience that
Oh, it's
watched
the
all
same
the
audience.
others.
Just a slightly. I mean, it's that audience keeps growing for the original season, so I'm sure the series, I should say. So I'm sure it can continue moving forward. But regardless, they know better than me. They know the ratings, so and they know what they need to earn. So I'm sure. Unfortunately, that's kind of a bad thing that with Jurassic Park and with the Superman reboot, it is hard to get anything original made. Everything has to be a reboot or based on some other IP, whether it's one of these like female authors that have taken off during TikTok. Everything has to be based on something else, basically, and it's very hard to get anything original out the door. And when it comes out, even when they get good reviews, it oftentimes does not succeed. So, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot more Jurassic Park films, a
Uh-huh.
lot more. In a way, F1, even though it's based on this known commodity, is kind of an original. So,
I heard they're already talking about a sequel. I don't know whether they're just wishing it, but they want Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt to go head to head in the sequel to F1.
yeah, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise originally were supposed to be in Ford versus Ferrari, and they read for it, but then Cruise dropped out because he wanted to do more driving. He didn't realize it would be that movie's not really about driving. There's relatively few driving scenes in it. But yeah, this would be all driving, and he's got a relationship with this director. He supposedly is trying to
Yeah.
make a Top Gun sequel with this director. So yeah, I mean, and Apple, this one film cost almost $300 million. The other one might cost even more than that. It's very hard to make any kind of profits when you spend that kind of money on a movie. But Apple's like a $4 trillion company. They don't even care if they make money on these movies. They're more interested in selling hardware. So if they can sell more, have a headset experience for the next movie, have a 3D experience for it, only available on their Apple headsets. I mean, there's a lot of synergy there.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
there's Apple devices all over this movie, by the way. It's like another Apple commercial, right? So
Jeez, yeah, back up the truck.
exactly. Maybe you know what they need to start an Apple F1 team with an Apple car that wins everything, and then that
Oh,
would
there
really
you
be
go.
that would be some synergy
Yeah.
for them, right? And they have infinitely large pockets, so they could become experts in no time at all. All right, that's a big digression, but I think it's worth having that conversation. All right, so I'm going to drop the conversation in here that Darren and I had last week, covering episodes 1 and 2 of Smoke. So, Darren, the intention here, hopefully, is to knock out this series in the next month and a half or so. And the series, of course, is, speaking of Apple TV, we are talking about Smoke with
Smoke.
Taron Egerton. This is a show created by Dennis Lehane. Speaking of all the people we just talked about here, there's a lot of commonality here. Dennis Lehane, I should say, very famous writer, has been around for decades. Written dozens of books. Just some of them, the ones that have been adapted into movies, of course: Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone,
Right.
Shutter Island, and he wrote.
I've read Shutter Island. Yep.
Yes,
that's where I heard his name from. I feel like when his name was so big on the credits for this Smoke show, I was like, I should know this guy.
And why is this guy such a big deal?
Only thing that came to mind.
And he really is a big deal. Not only, like I said, a best-selling author for many years, just the books I just mentioned, Mystic River and Gone Baby Gone, obviously very successful Oscar-nominated movies, and Shutter Island, a huge hit movie adaptation as well. And all those books, very successful. But then he really started transitioning into doing a lot of TV work. He was one of the staff writers on The Wire for years.
Ah, okay. Yeah, there's a bit of that kind of, I don't know. There's a bit of Wire in this new Smoke show. Maybe just a little bit.
Smoke show.
They're trying to go a little bit gritty, a little bit. Yeah. No, it's interesting. No, I'm interested to see what you think about this show.
Yes, I have many things to say. Not all positive, but so yeah, he started to transition more and more into TV. One of the consulting producers working with Scorsese again on Boardwalk Empire for, I think, the entire first season of that show. And then he was one of the showrunners, or not, at least one of the main writers for the Stephen King adaptations, Mr. Mercedes, and then The Outsider. Well, Mr. Mercedes not on HBO, but of course, The Outsider was a very prestigious HBO production, and eventually made it all the way to becoming an actual showrunner here for the second time. But the first thing he produced for Apple TV just 2 years ago, Taron Egerton in the miniseries Blackbird, based on another true crime adaptation. And have you ever seen Blackbird by chance?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Okay, anyway, this story is very intriguing. It is based on a true story. Taron Egerton plays this very cocky former athlete who gets caught. He's smuggling. He's basically a small-time drug dealer, and they give him an opportunity to basically convert. His father, played by Ray Liotta in one of his final performances, was a former cop, and they give him an opportunity to reduce his sentence if he can go into an insane asylum and stay with to basically befriend Larry Hall, is the character based on a true person, Larry Hall, who was one of these people who was a chronic confessor to crimes and had confessed to having seen this girl who disappeared, and everybody just kind of dismissed this year over year. But eventually they start getting convinced there's an actual serial killer killing these girls, and perhaps it's him. So he befriends him in prison and is trying to get a confession with him. And then there's this difficulty he feels in, does he believe what this guy is telling him? And also the idea that, like, how close is he getting, because he's a real womanizer. And then he starts thinking, here's this guy who's like really awkward, that never felt attractive to women. And then he kind of has the Taron Egerton character is this kind of Lothario who's always betting women all the time. And he's seeing this kind of toxic other side of the coin between the two of them. So it's very intriguing, very psychological. It was a huge hit for Apple TV, won multiple Emmy Awards. As a matter of fact, Paul Walter Hauser won Best Supporting Actor for playing the supposed killer. This show doesn't totally work for me, but at its best, when things are really ambiguous, the show, I think, fails for me at the end, only in trying to say, and this is the truth, when the show itself is about like how slippery the truth might actually be. And when the show is like that, it is excellent. So Apple was very excited about getting into bed again with Lehane, who is doing another true crime adaptation. This is based on a podcast called Firefly, but this seems to be heavily fictionalized, to say the least, from my experience of these first two episodes. And I have not looked ahead. I know critics have seen the whole show. The reaction is relatively mixed. Even now, even two episodes in, I am pretty mixed on what we're seeing here. But what I would say, the first section of episode 1, when he's inside the house that's on fire, this nightmare that he constantly has, is truly extraordinary. What'd you think?
The way they shoot the fires in this show, it's quite amazing. It's almost a religious experience when they're watching fires, they're watching the flame. It's beautiful and deadly at the same time. And it's certainly, I'm not a fan of fire. I think it's one of the worst ways I could think about dying. It's certainly frightening in this show.
Yeah, I thought this was some of the best filmed fire sequences I've ever seen. And just like being in the case with him, inside his mask, I should say, basically trying to escape from this burning house. And everywhere he turns, there's fire. It's falling around him. And I think that it's so important that they nailed this, because so much of the show is going to be about the allure, right? This, like you said, this religious fear and adulation at the power of this primal element. And he even says this in this very clunky narration that this not very good author is attempting, that the character himself, the only element that people are still afraid of is fire, and understandably so. So yeah, like before we get into any spoilers and break down the episodes, what was your general opinion of that opening sequence? But anything else generally you took away from this?
Yeah, I struggled through the pilot, I got to say. It's hard to go into it without getting any spoilers, but there's two firebugs that they're chasing. And so I'm into the story. I'm into both stories, to be honest. And I did like the story of the fry cook who is fascinated by these flames. And one of the shots that stand, there's amazing style in this show, by the way. There's a lot of reflections. There's a lot of things through a laptop. There's when this guy lights a fire and he stands outside and the flame or the sparks are coming down on him. I mean, it is incredible. It looks so good. And I'm really trying to get into this guy's headspace. But of course, there's two firebugs, and then it's a bit of a reveal of where this other firebug is, which I thought was very much more interesting. The second episode I thought was much more interesting, and there's a lot of comedy in this show, which I didn't get in the first episode. But Taron Egerton, he's a really interesting actor. He's got this face from like a throat. He kind of looks like a James Dean kind of guy. Great hair, this great face, but he's just a little bit crazy in all his roles that I see. He's just, and I think it's a really funny thing. I remember him from that Elton John biopic, which I thought he was fantastic. And that's a great film for a biopic. And I'm into him in this show because of this comedy element that he brings, and the way that he can switch from. I think it's funny that you brought up his narration, because I think it's deliberately bad, because he's this writer that he's got a dream of being a writer, but he's just not that good yet. And apart from that, Jurnee Smollett is incredible in this show, and I want to see more of her as well. The
two criticisms I've seen of the show that I think is are some are on the mark, some are not, but maybe all of it is on the mark, to be honest. So one side of it is this idea that, well, this guy's such a bad writer, as if like this is the author of the show doing this bad writing. It's like, no, he's not a good writer. his this book got rejected in the first episode. Like, it's not a good book. But that might be tough for audiences to watch that and not get the joke of it. And then the other thing is that Jurnee Smollett seems to be really on the ball and then kind of not on the ball in other instances. So that is, another critique. But I do agree that I think that she is like very feral, and she's really trying to prove something. And given the situation, she is kind of disgraced because she had an affair with her superior officer, played by Rafe Spall, in this film, or in this series, I should say. So everybody has their own kind of psychological trauma here, and that's what she's trying to overcome, is this relationship that's kind of haunting her, and how it's impacting her career, and trying to prove herself in a boys club, of course, and as a minority woman, no less. So all of that is even worse. But then, of course, we see, I do find it very intriguing that Taron Egerton, or however you pronounce his name, honestly don't know, but that he has his own issues, in the fact that he maybe feels like he should have aspired to more in his career. He obviously wants to be a writer. He has these illusions of grandeur, but I think it's very telling when he's analyzing why arsonists are arsonists. I think it's very interesting that he's talking about, well, these are usually men, and they usually feel like they don't have control in their lives. So they use arson as a way to A, have some power, but B, also to look at other people and say, see, you don't have control either. And we see that, both sides of that, with this first arsonist, who's called the D&C, the divide and conquer arsonist, where he'll set a small fire and then a larger fire somewhere else. And then basically, because the fire department is spread out so thin, the fires grow out of control. And then, of course, we have this other arsonist, one that we're pretty clear we know who this one is, which is this character, Freddie Fasano, played by, I'm not going to get this name right.
I was going to say.
Nater Guma Mabaho Mwine, and who, by the way, is also going to be in the Dexter show. He's a regular on that as well. So we'll see lots of him in the next few weeks. Obviously, when we see his situation, this fry cook working at this restaurant, who he explicitly is exactly the psychological profile that this Dave Gudson, the Taron Egerton character, describes, that he is put upon, doesn't have status, and he is looking at things that he is attracted to, things that he admires, like these families that he wishes he was part of. And the way he unfortunately decides to express that power is by burning their homes down with them inside of it.
And there's some shocking results of that as well. I mean, you see the results of people being trapped in fire, and it's quite graphic, and it's quite disgusting. I'm trying to get into the headspace of these people, because I don't know why you would deliberately light fires that would possibly kill people. I think it's crazy. Mm-hmm. So that's an aspect of the show I'm quite interested in. Right. To see their fascination with that.
And that's part of the reason that sells this show. We'll still save it for just another moment more, but there is a big reveal at the end of episode 2, something that I suspected from the very beginning anyway, that luckily they don't make us wait for that reveal, because Dennis Lehane has said that he did not want this show to be about who did it. He wants to be a show about why they do it. And to your point, I think that is what's fascinating, is understanding the psychology of someone who would commit this act, especially when they know how absolutely devastating the consequences could be. And understanding why that is the case is more interesting than, running down a bunch of suspects from week to week.
I was very happy when that reveal came, because I suspected it from the trailer and from all moments of the show are hinting towards it. And so when finally this reveal comes at the end of the second episode, I was all for it, and it was fun.
The couple of key points here before we get to that final reveal in episode 2. I did like the thing the show probably does most successfully. I think that the individual segments work well. They just haven't coalesced properly, I think. And for example, I really did like this slow reveal that the Gudson character, who seems to be so on the ball, he's like, he could just be like this quirky guy, loves his job, is also writing this book on the side. He's got this interesting relationship with his boss, played by Greg Kinnear, who's always great to see as well. You really know this is a type of character you've seen in TV shows and even in life. This is a very realistic person. And then little by little, you start seeing that, well, his relationship, that's not his son. He's married into this relationship. The relationship with his wife seems very flirtatious and healthy. And then it starts feeling like, well, maybe he's living in her house and he doesn't really have the control in the relationship that he seems to project early on. So I like how they're like dismantling this persona over the course of this first couple episodes of the show. What's less successful for me is trying to meld those stories with each other. Like you mentioned, the fry cook story is really interesting. This guy who is probably does not want to be doing these things, but is just like so timid and so broken down. It's the one way that he can express some control. It's a horribly tragic thing, of course, that he's killing these people in his own community. But it's interesting. It seems like it's really in two gears at the same time, but I guess maybe the show will gel more over time.
Yeah, I must admit I'm struggling with both of those characters' relationships with their female counterparts.
Yes.
Like the fry cook, I'm not quite believing that this hairdresser is trying to save him, or I'm not sure why she's being
and she's
so
attracted
nice
to him or something. Yeah, it's a very
when
bizarre.
he's giving nothing back, he's really closed up. And then also Taron Egerton's I'm not going to say it. Taron's character.
Taron, it's called Taron.
With his librarian wife, I'm trying to buy that a little bit, but it's very interesting about his because I'm in a blended family as well, so I've got a stepdaughter, and so the relationship between your step kids and your
biological,
but they're slightly different. You have to think about them a little bit more. I mean, you love them all the same, but he's probably not there yet, and I think it's interesting with him and his librarian wife. Did you pick up when they were going to have sex and he asked her, or she asked him, "Oh, do you want the pill? Do you want to have the pill?" Yeah, which is a fascinating thing to say. He's like, "I don't need it tonight."
He didn't need it tonight. That's right. Exactly.
I thought that was a great bit of writing. So yeah, I'm interested to see their relationship develop a bit more.
I hope people don't start using that, starting fires as a, especially because fire season is coming. That it's not a good cure for ED. Everybody, okay, don't start. I got to tell you, the most terrifying aspect of this whole entire show, and it really did scare me, the potato chips thing, right? When I go camping with my daughter or whatever, I'm always like, hey, you want to start a fire? If you have like Doritos or something and one match, that stuff goes up immediately. It's just instant fuel and very easy to build a fire that way. So when they're like, oh, he just puts like this couple of matches in a cigarette and leaves it in this rack. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I've literally built campfires using a small bag of potato chips. I'm like, I am terrified by this idea. It's like, if someone actually did this, and apparently someone was doing exactly this is, that aspect of the story is actually true. This was happening it wasn't California. It was on the West Coast though. I think it was around Oregon, but anyway, somewhere out there. And this was happening indeed. I just thought to myself, like, oh my God, like one bag of potato chips will like set a log on fire if you prep it properly. I'm like, this is just fuel upon fuel upon fuel. If you have a whole rack of potato chips, I was like immediately in my mind being like, I think every convenience store should start distributing those potato chips all over the store. I'm concerned there's going to be copycats.
But it's easy to think that too, because this show does present fire as a very interesting, very like
alluring.
What's the word? Alluring is the word. Yeah. So if you're that way inclined even a little bit, then it might interest you.
Exactly. And we had fires here. We just had a fire season here because we had a very dry winter, and we had fires near in parts of the state. And you could actually see the fire report. You would see like a gap where there's another fire burning over here, and they would have a marker on the map saying like, this is an arson. So when these fires start burning, people go out there and start setting fires, these arsonists. So I'm like, I am legitimately concerned that we are going to start seeing people committing these fire attacks again.
Oh, totally. I mean, when it's fire season here, it's summer, it's dry, it hasn't rained for months and months. They're always deliberately lit.
That's scary, very scary. I know I'm Portuguese, like I mentioned, and we had massive fires there a few years back. Same thing there. It was half the fires or more were set by arsonists.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, but I guess there is an appeal to it, and I do think that that works here in the episode as well. That it kind of conveying that visually. So I did like the way they represented that. Although I do have my concerns. Hopefully, they'll make these figures so pathetic that it'll paint them in a very negative light.
They are starting to portray them as, yeah, similar to that, like that, where you're not actually aspiring to be these characters, are you?
So in episode one, I very much liked the character dynamics. It was too long, I thought, but in general, I was pretty happy with episode one. Then episode two rolls around, and I start to scratch my head a little bit. And some things I liked here, I very much liked the visual representation again of that fry cook character, seeing the fire burning. It is so bizarre, like the whole idea that this hairdresser is, first of all, like you mentioned, it's such a weird interaction where she comes in and she's very flirtatious, but it seems like she might be mocking him. But then when she actually cuts his hair, she's actually very tender with him. So I'm like, are we supposed to believe that she's looking at this fry cook, this middle-aged fry cook, and attracted to him or something? This is a preposterous set of interactions there for sure. But yeah, so despite that, I'm bumping against that, but I do like the character in general and the psychology that's expressed there within. And I like the investigation as they're slowly closing in. Michelle Calderon, which is the Journey Smollett's character. Yeah, clue that's earlier in the episode. She has seen in one of the videos that the limp is a fake limp. This character, the DNC arsonist, is always walking with very pronounced limp, but sometimes on the videos he seems to let it slip. So she's noticed this. And meanwhile, they have started to suspect that maybe it may be another firefighter, and they're looking at their work records to see, well, which firefighters would be available on the days that the fires were set. They kind of hone in on this one guy who's a real jerk, who seems to be absent a lot. And when she goes and investigates him, tails him one day, and ends up where he has like basically built an underground bunker, and this is why he's constantly out of work, stocked to the teeth with probably a lot of illegal arms. And when she suspects that she has come upon something more nefarious, she shoots him in both legs. that whole part when she like perfectly shoots him in both thighs was another silly sequence here. She comes up with a story to cover her butt, and no one really buys it, but this guy seems to be like a real jerk that no one seems to mind taking the fall. But of course, nothing indicates that he is the arsonist. And then after an especially tense interaction between this family with when Dave gets back home, it turns out the final reveal that to get a little more control over his, what should I say, his
home life.
Yeah, after having this kind of blow to his ego of being humiliated by his wife and this stepson. And of course, that, his kind of idyllic, I can have sex when I want, even though I might need a pill to do so, is suddenly going to be interrupted with this teenager being in the house all the time. It turns out, of course, not a surprise to almost anybody, that he indeed is the DNC killer, or I should say arsonist.
Yeah, we don't know that he's killed yet, and I don't think they would go that far just yet. But he is setting these potato chip fires.
Well, in the first episode of the podcast, which I have listened to, the reason that this investigation escalates, it may not have happened yet, although I do think they mentioned that somebody's died, but maybe it's the fire set by the other arsonist. The reason that this escalates is because there is a death at a convenience store. Someone gets trapped inside. We see a woman almost die here when she's trapped, the skin peeling off of her body from the heat, but she does not die. But apparently there will be deaths. If not already, then there will be deaths in the future. And of course, that's going to bring even additional heat, no pun intended.
Well, talking about heat, let's talk about Journey Smollett, because she is shot so sexy
yes.
in this show all the time. She's just smoldering. She's always got tank tops on, her hair's all out. I bought her in the action sequence. I quite liked that.
Yep.
And she also uses like the sex dungeon leathers to tourniquet the guy's legs. I mean, she's a breakout star of the show, and I'm not sure if she's she's clearly supposed to be that sexy, because it's the camera fetishizes her almost, and I'm all for it. I think she's great. I thought it was a bit cheesy when she was interviewing the fire guys early. I kind of didn't buy that. I thought it was very stereotypical how,
Yeah.
her inexperience gets showed up there.
She doesn't know what an
But
engineer is. The engineer drives the truck.
correct. Yep. Well, I didn't know what an engineer is either. So yeah.
But
Okay.
she should have, I mean, she should have done
She
a little bit.
should have done her research. And I do think it's a little bit naive that she doesn't suspect her partner
Mhm.
in any way, even though he's been super shifty, yeah, from the start.
Well, it seems like she does suspect him by the end because after this kind of blows over and she talks to the Greg Kinnear character about like, oh, well, you got away with it this time, but this is not your firebug. And she says, do you have any other suspects? And she goes, well, one. And that's when we cut to
Right.
Egerton walking out of the house, the convenience store, just as it catches fire. So I do think, and once again, like you mentioned, if anyone's seen the trailer for this show, it's pretty clear that they are pitching this as a cat and mouse between her and him.
Okay. Yeah, that feels like the way that it could go. Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think that's going to be at least part of the show. But I think, and I have heard, by the way, this show has multiple twists. I think there are more twists to come, which make this show very much not like the true crime that it's based on. A couple of things I wanted to mention is that you mentioned to me that you couldn't remember where you had seen her, that you liked her in something and you couldn't remember what it was. And you just saw The Order recently, and she was in The Order. So that is one of the places you might have seen her.
Yes, I like that movie. Yeah, that was cool.
Same. So that
And also, I have seen her in. I watched the first episode of Lovecraft Country, and she was in that as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that entire series. I thought this is a total digression, but I thought the pilot episode of Lovecraft Country is so good, and then that show in general is really rough. But there are 3 or 4 episodes that are absolutely jaw-droppingly incredible. And then there are terrible episodes in there too. So it's a really mixed bag on that show. But yeah, she's very good in that as well. Everybody's pretty good in that. So given this reveal here at the end, how enthusiastic are you for seeing how things progress here?
Well, yeah, unlike you, I quite like the second episode. I'm trying to buy into the comedy of it because that's more entertaining to me than the real drama, which seems a little bit cheesy. I hope
shooting him in both thighs
become...
was a little. That's where I was kind of. But I have a theory. I have a theory on that as well. By the way, I always have a theory on everything. I have a theory on that. But go ahead.
What was Greg Kinnear's theory? Was you were aiming for a dick, but you missed
you
twice.
Missed on both sides, exactly. That's not my theory, but
I hope they're not going to do a bit of a love thing because they're very different characters and there's no sexual tension between them at all.
None at all. Exactly. I agree.
Yeah, which is good, which is fresh. It's good to see. Because he
does flirt with her though. There's that flirtation. I have that scene where he's talking about how they light a fire. There's a couple of times once they're at the computer and he is doing a little flirtation there, which again seems to be like this is the role he's playing. This is what's most interesting to me about this is again Edgerton playing this character because he's playing somebody who's pretending to be somebody else. And he's doing it very well, I think. And I think some people won't like the performance because of that, but I'm like, no, I think it's intentional. He is trying to present that guy like that, like he knows everything. He's like everybody. He's a friendly guy. Everybody loves him. But then we find out, he doesn't really hang out after hours. He doesn't really hang out with the other guys. So it's all a presentation he's doing, especially for her, because she's an outsider. So he can invent this version of himself. And that's probably what he's doing through writing this book as well. So all of that, I think, is the most interesting part of the show for me. And maybe as part of that, there's that moment where she's at the computer and he's like a little close to her and she doesn't back away. Like she's kind of used to this, I'm sure, in working this job. But the other time that they're a little flirtatious is when he's like has the cigarettes and the matches and he's showing her how it works. It's almost like they're about to share a cigarette with each other at that moment. So he's definitely getting off on showing her how he does what he does right in that specific moment.
Yeah, and I think that his true face came out in the argument
Yes, absolutely.
with his adopted stepson. And he was being so cool. I was like, I can't be that cool with my kids, you know. Oh yeah, that doesn't phase me. That doesn't phase me. It's like my anger would come out straight away because that's me. It's like, no, let's stop this right here. When he's trying to be cool, he's trying to be the cool stepdad. Yep, yep. And then his anger explodes, and
Yeah.
it's very ugly to see.
And the most telling part of that as well, I think, is that when the son shows up, even before the argument escalates, the wife is very on edge. So she knows that this is going to get ugly. So that's very telling, because if he just got mad because it's like, hold on a second, you're disrespecting me in my house, then that wouldn't have the same power as her walking on eggshells at that moment, being like this, he's going to blow up again. Because then you know that this is his regular pattern, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's right. Yeah, good pickup.
So yeah, I thought that was well done as well, and that's when you really start seeing the mask slip for sure, and of course, fully by the end. So I'm intrigued, although the show isn't perfectly gelling all these different elements yet. But I am curious. All right, I'll drop my theory here, and
Let's go.
anybody who doesn't like getting spoiled, because I do think this might be a spoiler. So anybody who doesn't like being spoiled, you can skip out. What I would say to you, Darren, if you don't mind being spoiled, I'm about to spoil this potentially, because this is all speculation on my part. But
look, you got to be wrong one of these days.
I could be wrong about this one for sure. I could definitely be wrong about this one. But there's some weirdness in the construction of this story. And I do wonder, is this the novel that we're reading being presented to us? So will there be a reveal where this is a construct, and then either we're going to see the real story outside of this structure, or the other possibility is that some of what we've seen is real, but like all of a sudden when she's breaking into underground bunkers and shooting guys in the thighs, maybe that's from the book. So are we slipping from reality into a segment of the book back and forth? Or is this all a construct that we're in right now? And then we'll find out. Would that be more satisfying for you? Let's say we find out that that this is all the book we've been reading. And for example, someone's saying like, it's very suspicious that all these details from real crimes were in your book, which I'm bringing in the real world case into this, by the way, which is what actually ended up happening. Somebody was caught years later because they wrote a book that had all these details in it. So is it possible we're seeing the book and that's why the plot's a little awkward? Would that be satisfying for you, or would that be frustrating for you as a viewer?
I don't think it would be either, but it is very interesting to. I'm just trying to work that out in my head. Is he writing about Journey's character at the moment? I don't think he's really introduced her as a character in his book, or these people that he's writing about. We haven't really been given much of his writing so far. So,
well, my theory is
stretch.
Well, that's where it's maybe it could be frustrating. My theory is that maybe everything we've seen is the book.
So what's real then?
That's where it could be frustrating, because imagine that ends up being the reveal. And the reason I mentioned that is exactly the way you talked about, like the way that we are interacting with the Calderon character, right? And how she's a little bit sexualized, a little bit, kind of an idealized version of this tough girl investigator. And so is he, like, we haven't met the real characters yet in this particular version that I'm pitching here. And you seem very skeptical of it at this point. But imagine that we have not yet met the real people. We are actually inside the book that he has written.
Well, that's going to make the next episode very interesting to watch, to try to think of it from that perspective. That reminds me of Shutter Island, not to give away the twist of Shutter Island, but that seemed to be, that was a bit of a construct as well for a lot of the film. I think I picked the twist quite early on. But I could see that movie being very disappointing to people who were going with it, in the same way that if your theory is true, this could upset a lot of people.
This is the same person who wrote Shutter Island, just to be clear.
That's right.
So, and Shutter Island, actually, I hadn't even made that connection until you said it right now, but I think that is a good example. And, once again, maybe strengthens the argument that we are seeing that, since he might be borrowing one of his own devices. but that's a perfect example of that, right? Where we don't meet the real character. We meet the version of the character that he has written for himself throughout Shutter Island, and we don't meet the real character until later on. In this particular case, it wouldn't be that he's living in a delusion. It's that we're reading his book, and then maybe we see the actual person eventually later on. So anyway, that is, and because if that's not the case, some of these scenes are very badly written. and in my theory, and my theory of it is that, of course, they're badly written. They're written by a bad writer.
But someone's got to pick up the book eventually
Yes.
if we're actually seeing it. Yeah, someone's got to get on his side and publish this thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, in my imagination, if this is correct, I would imagine that at some point we're going to find out that we are reading the book and that there is an investigation. And I assume that the Egerton character would play himself in the actual author, and this version of him inside the book would be the same person. I mean, why else would you make the show with that actor if not the case? And then maybe Calderon did investigate him at some point or something like that, or somebody he actually knows in the real world. But then we would see these real world counterpoints to the versions of the characters we've seen previously. Maybe it's a stretch.
Very interesting.
Maybe it's a stretch.
But I mean, that bunker was pretty well set up. I mean, the giant gun, the armory, and then the sex dungeon.
So
I mean,
preposterous. Yeah, especially. I mean, that's when I started to suspect this. By the way, that he has like a fully operational sex dungeon too in his prepper basement. What? And all these guns that no one noticed, even though he works in this, at the in this fire department on the West Coast, by the way, where all those states are liberal states, like the gun laws are pretty tough there. And she shoots him perfectly in the thighs, both thighs. I was just like, what? Did I just walk into like a weird 80s action movie? Like, what's happening? And then when I thought about how disjointed that was and how kind of out of tone it was, I'm like, it's exactly what he would write. So I don't know. It remains to be seen if I'm right or not. You seem more skeptical of this theory than you have of some of my other ones.
It's just, yeah, it's mind blowing. I did not go there at all. But yeah, like I say, the next episode's going to be really cool to watch it with that in mind.
If my theory turns out to be the case, they better not drag this out until like episode 7 and then pull the rug. People will be like screaming about this. So they got to reveal that pretty early on, right? So hopefully within the next episode or so. All right. And Darren, what'd you think of episode 3? I like this episode. I think I like this one the best. I think audiences are kind of turning away from the show, to be honest. But I really did like this third episode. What'd you think?
Very interesting. I like this show. I've been looking at reviews, not reading them, but I see all the reviews are mixed and they've seen all the episodes, but I'm right into this show. I really like it. And I think the character of Calderon, Journey Smollett, she's so good.
Yeah.
I think she's doing so much with the character that I'm fully into this show, but I am looking at it through a lens of what you introduced as this guy is writing the show. So very interesting, and I think there is a few hints to that in this episode too.
Yeah, curious. I'm curious to hear you say that because I, of course, am looking for the show through that lens, and I think I might still be right in that aspects of the show are written. There are projections of what's being written, but maybe I'm wrong that most of what we're seeing is as a construct. And then I did start thinking, especially after our conversation last week, that would maybe be really irritating to the audience if you did that. But I couldn't help but think, by the way, they bring it up again, the name of this town, it's like fictionalized town. The fact that this is like a fictionalized town with like these nondescript license plates, that's the type of thing you would put into a fictionalized story, right? Like if you were a cop and you were writing a story, you probably wouldn't want to write it in your own backyard because there could be some liability with using people's names or even someone that seemed like the person you're talking about. So the fact it's like kind of like in a nondescript state, in a town with a fake name, maybe this whole thing is written. I mean, of course it is written, but I'm saying maybe it's written within the context of the show itself.
by the character. There was that scene where he was on his laptop and he started to write something and he
Yeah.
couldn't get it out, and it was a bit cheesy, and then he finally worked out what sentence he wanted to write, and then the show took off again.
Yeah. I also
So
like the fact that
that's
he's,
yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to interject there just to say that I also like that idea that it seems to have helped him solve his, which I think is a really clever aspect of the show, that his creative aspect of writing the story is helping him solve the crime potentially as well, which I thought was clever.
It is clever, yeah, and I'm liking him as a character as well, even though he's a bit duplicitous. He plays the character with such a comedic bent that it's
Yes.
so fun to watch him. Yeah.
That's what's interesting about him. I have a weird relationship with him in general, the actor, because he always seems to be kind of smirking uh, in his performance. And I think sometimes that works. Like in Kingsman, I'm not even a huge fan of Kingsman, but I think his performance is fun there because he obviously is this overly cocky guy. And then when he kind of goes, whoop, like I'm in over my head, and that understanding that he's done that is fun. He was much younger, of course, playing a different type of character there, but that smirk sometimes rubs me the wrong way because I don't know if he's intentional. And I mean, at this point, I've come around to the fact that he definitely is aware of it. He's using it intentionally with his roles. But I did sometimes bump up against that because I'm like, does he know he's doing that? But here, I think I'm pretty certain that in this particular performance, he's definitely using that, as part of his disguise in a way, right?
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, the first thing I wanted to mention to you, we didn't discuss this at all in our first two episode recap, but each one of these episodes kicks off with the definition of a word. So episode one starts off with creativity, and I found the definition interesting, where it says bringing something to existence from imagination and skill, or imaginative skill, I should say. And I thought that was really interesting because, of course, we cut from that directly to the fire. And I'm like, yeah, so you're bringing something to existence from your imagination. And of course, that's writing a book, but that's also creating the fire in a way too, right? So I thought that was an interesting parallel that I think they're intentionally trying to draw, that maybe he's a thwarted creative person and this is a form of creation for him.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I did notice those titles, and I've been trying to think about how to bring them in to the themes of the shows. But yeah, that's a really good point. Another thing that we haven't talked about is the original theme song for the show.
Oh yes, I
by
definitely
Tom
wanted to
York.
talk about this. Yes, right, right. I found that very funny because I think we discussed on the podcast, right, where we were talking about, was it maybe this that we're talking about Tom York was doing the soundtrack for this, and you were like, well, as long as it's not one of those like Eraser type songs. And I'm like, I think we have an outtake from Eraser in this very show.
I mean, his voice is just so iconic and it's
Yeah,
immediately recognizable. And I just like that it's an original track. I like that they're not
yeah.
buying a track from somewhere else. And he's written it specifically for the show, I think, which is really cool. So we'll have to dig into the lyrics a little bit more to see how they relate to the themes.
Yeah, I haven't actually broken it down. Not a huge fan of. I'm a huge fan of Radiohead. We just listened to Radiohead on the drive home right now, and so a huge fan, and even a fan of most of his solo work. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Suspiria remake. Have you seen the Suspiria remake?
Oh, yeah, I have seen that. That's an interesting film.
It is interesting. I do like it, even though it's tough for sure. But I think
It
there's an
is.
interesting read on it. But I love his score for that movie. I think is really good. I've listened to it off, just on its own, and so I've liked some of the soundtrack work he's done. And have you ever seen Anima on Netflix by chance?
I have not, no.
I recommend that. You should check it out. He has an EP called Anima, and the entire EP is visualized as a short film, like 25 minutes long, directed by P.T. Anderson. So it's really good. You should check it out. I think you'd like that. In a different mode, like there's kind of dance beats and stuff in there. It starts moody, but then it introduces these other elements which repeat. It's good stuff. This one is not working fully for me, mostly because there's this very dark tone that I'm not sure the show has paid off yet, but I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe I need to dig into the song a little bit more.
Yeah, we're still early in the series, so a lot hasn't paid off
Sure,
yet.
for sure.
Hmm. But yeah, I'm liking it. I'm liking it. I'm even liking the silly, um, the other Pyro who's going for his job interview, and
Yeah,
he's
same.
completely ridiculous in his job
Right.
interview, and he has
Yeah.
that weird expression where his mouth is like half hung open. I mean, it looks like no one's home, and he's trying to audition for this job. I thought that was so funny. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be.
You know what's strange about him, and that I have known people like that, not people like that in my friend group or whatever, but I've been in whatever circumstances where I'm at a fast food restaurant, stopping in some part of the state I'm not familiar with, and pull in. And you're interacting with people like this, and you're like, you can't get a read. Like, is this person on the spectrum? Are they like unhoused? Like, I can't quite get a read on this type of person. So this is a very specific type of person, which definitely exists. And you really don't think about like, what is the day to day for this person? So I do kind of find it fascinating to spend time with them. And to your point, it is hard to get a read on this because it could be completely artificial, but the actor is really committed to this performance. So it's it's very interesting to watch, and really can't get a read on what the show is trying to do with this character. But it would be funny if this all turns out to be a construct, like part of this artificial story, and that the actor's so committed to the performance that it's like maybe it's detrimental in what it's trying to achieve potentially. But then I guess if it was like really over the top and comedic, it would be maybe too much of a giveaway, or that it's just bad writing.
I do wonder whether there is a trick in this series, and I'm not sure when the trick is going to pay off. It reminds me something of was it Westworld, where there was this
Yeah.
whole construct, there was a trick,
Yeah.
and you just realized something was happening and you couldn't get it. And I think for that series, I had to jump online and work it out because I just couldn't watch it and be satisfied each week to week without knowing what was going on. So I'm not sure how long they're going to drag this out, if indeed there is a trick to this series. But I feel like the writer has got something going on.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that even if the twist I anticipate is wrong, that I think there is going to be some kind of twist. I am curious. I'm curious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, that's good. So how many episodes are we going for with this one?
It's 9, which I think is a little long.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
yeah, that's my concern too. I think I could be wrong about this also, but I think Blackbird was like 7 episodes, which I think was like the right length for that show, and maybe the right length for a show like this as well. So maybe split down the middle. It could be truth versus fiction, but still, I still think maybe 3 episodes on either side, 7 rather than 4 episodes on either side of 9. 9's a long season. That's all I just got to say. That's all I'll say.
It is a long season, yeah, especially with not too many characters to focus on.
Exactly.
Even though I'm going to say again, Journey Smollett, she's doing such a good job. I'm really enamored with her character and with her performance, and the way that she's really on the outer with her own
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
with the situation that she was in as a child, and if the flashbacks are true of what we're seeing, I mean, it's just ghastly the way that she was locked in this cupboard.
Insane. Yeah.
Insane. And the way that she's on the outer with the rest of her family is cool because she's on the outer with the investigation. She's on the outer
Yeah.
with her partner, even though she doesn't really know it yet. Yeah, I really want to see her again and again and again in these coming up episodes just to see what happens. Also, Greg Kinnear is
Yeah.
so good. He's just so funny and he's just so cool. Doesn't get much action, but what with the scenes that he has, he just nails. Yeah, I'm liking this show.
Yeah, I am
What can I
too.
say?
Same here. I'm amazed, by the way, getting Kinnear here, because I think I completely agree. He's so good. And obviously, he's been a lead for many films and still gets lead work even now. and has done terrific performances in feature work, smaller films, even though he's not as big a star as he was. But to get him here to be every time he's in, he steals every scene he's in, but he's barely in the show. It's like, what a like egoless thing to do as a big name, you know? So it's, but you know what? I could be wrong about all of this. If we get a rug pull, is he a more important character if there's another investigation later in this season, right? So let's wait and see where that all plays out.
Let's wait and see. Yep. Okay. We're going to have patience with this show, and that's cool.
We might have to have too much patience, but we'll see. We'll see. I want to get into Calderon's backstory, which is very important in this particular episode of the show. But a couple of things I wanted to touch back on the words we get in each episode. So episode 2 was inspiration. I'm not sure how that ties into that other than inspiration for writing the book, for starting the fires. But episode 3 actually is what I was trying to say. Episode 3 is denial. So how do you think denial ties into this particular episode of the show?
Is it tied into Calderon's character where she or her family
her family might be in denial, right?
Yeah, about the mother, who's an old lady now and possibly deserves to come out of jail according to the family, whereas Calderon is vehemently opposed to that.
There's this is where I'm thinking that maybe this is not what actually happened. So there might be facts here, but they're being used for a fictionalized story. When she walks in, and maybe we'll work from the back of the episode forward, but when she walks in to testify to keep her mom in jail, and of course later on her brother being like, you're being unreasonable, not letting her out, which kind of makes sense because she's older, whatever. But the thing that doesn't ring true at all here, and maybe is the one scene that made me feel like, well, maybe I am right about my theory, was the whole situation where she goes in there to say, don't let my mom out. The priest who's on the panel says, well, what would you need her to do? And he's like, well, an apology would be a good starting point. And he goes, well, she wasn't in her right mind. She thought she was saving your soul. So what would she apologize for? Who would say that to this girl whose mother tried to burn her inside of a closet? Like, what the hell's going on? This is the worst priest ever.
That was really strange because also she's in a dress, which we've never seen her in a dress in any other scene, in any other of the episodes. And the way she walks into that room and goes and sits down
immediately, right?
Witness chair immediately. It was really odd. Yeah, you're right.
That's what made me think that it is almost like the show is telling us something. Remember early on where he is writing, he walks in and he gets a jug of milk. First, he has the guy just walk out of the store. And then the lady's like, wait a second, you're stealing that milk. He's like, oh, I guess he has to pay for the milk. And then that might leave a clue, right? Because he had to pay for it. He couldn't steal it, which would be even more suspicious. Anyway, then strange milk, which of course titled the episode, by the way. And then now it has to go into a bag. Aha, it has to be in a bag. Then the bag is, and it turns out to be a black bag, which is a big clue here. Because the black bag, because right, those white bags are pretty clear, right? You could see through them that we'd still see some pretty strange milk if it was a white bag. So that was an interesting detail that he uncovered from the creative process. But at the same time, I just think about that. He just walks out of in the first draft, he just walks out with the jug in his hand. And exactly like you said, that whole sequence at the end, if there's no one else here to testify, I guess we're going to wrap things up. And then she walks straight in, sits in the chair. No one tells her to take a seat. No one introduces her when she walks in the room. She just walks in, sits down, and starts giving her testimony. That is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Maybe that is indeed just one of these badly written scenes that from his fictional account.
That's so funny. Isn't that so clever? If that is what's happening here.
If it's not, it's just bad writing. Dennis Lehane, by the way, in an interview I heard him give this week, said that he had a lot of fun. The most fun he had with this season of show was writing someone write badly, which I think is a lot of fun. I always think that's very entertaining to watch when somebody, not necessarily writing, but I guess it's a similar thrill. I love when you see somebody act badly, but they act badly in a believable way. And I'm like, you have to be a good actor to act badly. in a believable way. Because, if you're a good actor, obviously you're giving a good performance. If you're a bad actor, then you're just bad. But to be like someone who is, selling the fact that this person's not good at acting, because they have to be natural when they are, just doing the performance, and then bad when they are doing the bad acting, which I find that a lot of fun, that layer of that unreality. But maybe we're seeing the same thing here with the writing.
That is so fun. That reminds me of that film, The Room, or the Seth Rogen,
the remake,
Franco,
the
the
fictionalization. Yeah.
when they did have to act
Right.
really badly, and it was just so funny. They just went with it, went for it. It must be fun to write if you are a known writer and everybody knows that you're so good at writing and that all your sentences are crafted amazingly, and you get the chance to write really bad sentences. That's so fun.
All right, something that might be a construct or might be legitimately happening in the show that I have a big question mark for. She is pretty clever. We already saw that she, Calderon, assumes that he's the last suspect she has. In and of itself, this could be a fun cat and mouse between the two of them, because she needs to investigate him without playing her hand too severely, but he kind of already knows that she's investigating him. So that is fun that we're already at that point in episode 3. So I am curious to see how that plays out. Plus, of course, he is actually doing a legitimate investigation of the milk jug arson. So can these two things coexist, and can she use his investigation without playing her hand too heavily? And, if she's going around him, when will he find out? All of this stuff is a lot of fun. My question is, she's basically profiling the same way these other people they investigated when they were not on duty and a fire occurred. So now she's doing it for him. Where are these fires that occurred? Not the ones that happened in the convenience stores, but the other ones, the distractions, the D&C, right? Divide and conquer, not the distraction fires, which were in the convenience stores, the other bigger fires out in the wild. So now she's trying to find those. She's driving around. She's looking for one of these devices that will match the ones from the convenience store. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? A cigarette butt in the middle of the woods? Yeah, I found a cigarette butt. What are you talking about? So none of this makes any sense. So she starts predicting that the most convenient way to do this would be at stop signs and at red lights, because of course you naturally are stopping. So she stops and throws a coin out the window and happens to find one of these devices. That is quite a lucky circumstance.
It stretched it for me a bit as well, I must say. But
she found it. That could be part of the written story, though. So, right?
She found it, and it could be part of the written story, and they refused to test it. There's no reason to test it.
Right?
Come on, of course there's reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a reason to test it, even if they're like, well, there's never any leftover remainder device in the other occurrences. But if we're predicting that this device will occur and we can get a match to it, this is a big clue, right? So, I mean, it doesn't seem reasonable that they would not want to pursue this. Or I guess they would pursue it if she now has to go and hook up with her ex-boss again, who, what do you think about, we didn't really talk about that, the Rafe Spall situation. So she is disgraced for having an affair with her previous commander, even though they had a really ugly breakup, by the way. And he was even threatening to her that now he's like, hey, let's hook up again. I'll run those fingerprints if you hook up with me again. I mean, this guy, that seems like a bad, after considering the way they left things earlier, I'm not sure I would want to be alone with him.
It's very strange, isn't it? That actor always plays a nice guy. So it's very jarring seeing him as an evil kind of character.
Wasn't he the bad guy in Jurassic World? Which one? The second of the Jurassic Worlds. Anyway, I think he presents as a nice guy. That's kind of his, presents as a nice guy. So.
And how devastating when he says, I just left my wife for you.
Yeah, I know.
Like, whoa, how's the pressure? It's like, I didn't ask you to do that.
He's like, she's like, that's not what I was hoping for.
Wow. I thought he was her partner, but okay, so he was her ex-boss, or still kind of her boss, but she's on loan to the Fireys. And he is kind of helping her as well, isn't he? There's that amazing shot of them in the. By the way, the cinematography and the shots
beautiful,
in this series are incredible. There's that shot when they're in the alley and there's a graffiti of an eye
Mhm.
on the wall, and it's reflected in the puddle next to them. I mean, it's just amazing. It's
Yeah.
just beautiful. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that aspect of the show as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes back to that incredible, like utterly incredible. I can't, I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but I can't wait until we have another extended fire sequence because the that first sequence when he's inside the fire, that kind of event that maybe made him fall in love with the arson in the first place is so potent that is and terrifying as well. And they just we I guess we didn't talk about it in so much detail, but I love the detail that he sees a firefighter come to rescue him and he runs towards him, and it's actually a reflection of himself inside the fire. So it's like, he's actually going deeper into the house. What an incredible visual in that first episode of the show. But yeah, the cinematography, even beyond that, is still spectacular. But I can only imagine we're going to get another really impressive fire sequence later on.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, hopefully there's not too many copycats that come out of this. I mean, there's a few
I'm
different
worried, right?
fires, and we see a nice BMW convertible
Oh
get
yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
go up in flames, which is somewhat satisfying for people that are not massive fans of BMWs. um,
I love that
but
the setup of that scene is so hilarious, by the way, because
it really
she is washing her car with the soft top down. I'm like, I'm not washing my convertible with the top down. Like, what are you talking about?
She must be very exact with that water
Very
placement, the
exact.
hose placement, because come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then, of course, opens herself up to getting car bombed as well. Yeah, that's pretty funny. That whole situation is pretty ridiculous where that car, she's like, that's that she's been trying, she just had saved up enough money. That also seems like a weird detail to throw in there. I like, always wanted this car, saved up for 10 years, and now this happens. Seems like very written as well. So we'll see if that is, I'm very curious if this turns out to be a construct, if we have to actually go back and parse out, if that'll be part of our expectation that we'll parse those things out, or whether the show will very cleanly tell us which one of these things actually happened and didn't. I think it's going to have a very clear delineation if that is the case, because once again, that could be frustrating if I spend all my time trying to figure out what things happened and which ones were part of the story.
When they have reveals like that, you want them to show you step by step how they created that trick for you in your mind, and then you can unravel it as the show shows you, and you're like, oh, of course,
Right.
This show's so smart, amazing. Why couldn't I get that?
Yeah, I think the show, I mean, if the show indeed turns out to be that way, I predict there will be a sequence where someone's doing the actual investigation and they will literally say, like, they will play the scene as written in the book, which we've seen, and be like, that's not how it happened, was it? And then we'll see the real version of it. And it'll be that blunt, because I think if they just kind of say, hey, half of this was real, half of it was not real, figure it out, audience. I think people are going to be like very upset about that's a lot of work to put the audience through.
It really is, especially
this isn't the Prestige, especially like if you dragged out the Prestige for like for 9 hours. Like that would be a lot to keep straight in your head the whole entire time.
And to be honest, if you hadn't have brought up this theory of yours last week, I probably wouldn't be looking at the show through that lens anyway.
My question to you, because I was thinking about cutting that out. All of this might be cut out. So my question to you is, in what you say right now, we'll decide. No pressure. But does it make watching the show more fun to try to layer that on it, or less fun? Because if it's less fun,
I do think it's more fun because it gives you another way to think of the show.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to it as well. And I don't think it's spoiling anything.
Yeah.
To watch it through that different perspective. And so, yeah, this last episode, I quite enjoyed seeing that scene when he was writing, couldn't get it, finally got it, and the show took off again. I think there's something there. I think you got something, Victor.
I think you're absolutely right that it feels like when the show kind of kicks in and keeps flowing from when he figures that out, and it is the way the show begins, that it's almost as if we're like watching one of those Stephen King adaptations where he's writing what we're watching on the screen, and then he gets stuck, and he's like, okay, now I got it, and then we continue the story, right? Like explicitly telling us we're seeing something that's being written on the screen. And I agree. Like, even if I'm wrong about the theory, I like having that because it's it adds, like you said, it adds a game to, I mean, honestly, it's like what people do anyway. Like people speculated on Lost, for example, and then half those theories were wrong, but people enjoyed trying to make the theories work until they didn't, right? So, but I'll keep it in there. Given what you said, I'll keep it in there. Hopefully, most people will enjoy that as well.
Good. And if you don't, let us know.
I mean, a couple of things we maybe want to touch on here before we wrap up. One is, of course, speaking of the familial parallels we see here, the son, this adopted son, and his relationship, of course, has a bad relationship with our protagonist, or one of them. And then, but also, we see him now with the dad who kind of triggered that ugly response last week. The fact that he is leaving town and he won't be living with him anymore. And turns out he has a pretty bad relationship with that son as well. So, I mean, a lot of these shows, not too surprisingly, have to do with these bad relationships between fathers and sons. But what do you think the show's telling us in showing this other side of this relationship, this son relationship with his biological dad?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I almost forgot about that until you mentioned it. I'm not sure if we'd even seen that dad
Yeah, I think it's the
before.
first time we see him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it really slipped my mind, that scene. It's fine, but you're right. I'm not quite sure. I mean, the kid now maybe is going to become more of a part of the show because he's going to become more of a family unit with his mum
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
this stepdad, because they are married. I think he said they were married.
Right.
Obviously, I think maybe the son just becomes more of a part of the show. The dad is obviously going to disappear because he's going to do his tenure somewhere else.
Right.
But yeah, he's very interesting to introduce him, and then who knows what's going to happen.
I think that was important because obviously we could just have this, leave it as it was last week, where there's this tension. The son's now living with them full time, so they can't really have the newlywed lifestyle they have with this teenager in the
Yeah.
house. And they could have left it at that. But obviously, to include this scene this week where we see the fact that he has this falling out with his biological father as well. So he is kind of maybe looking for, despite the ugly interaction last week, looking for more of a father figure. So I think that there's going to be more there, because why else include that scene basically, right? To try to drive that point home.
And if he wants some power in the situation, if his stepdad is a fire investigator, maybe he starts lighting fires too.
That is what I was thinking. That to be interesting if there is actually like he starts to become an arsonist himself, or if he starts seeing signs that the kid has the tendency there as well. The other thing, some paralleling here that I thought was interesting is, of course, we have the father dynamic with this son, and of course, we have the flashback and just the family dynamic, this broken family dynamic, very broken when you look at Calderon's family, how the remainder of the family, well, like, I mean, they seem to want her to go to the birthday party and things like that. So it doesn't seem like they're cutting her out. She's obviously babysitting the niece, which is actually very sweet to see her in that mode. So that's all interesting to see her in this different family dynamic. But of course, it's a really toxic family dynamic when it comes to the fact that the family is completely divided on whether the mom should come out of prison or not. And yeah, I mean, when she's that old, I mean, what kind of risk can she actually pose? You would argue, but I think it's the fact primarily that she's never apologized for this, which is insane, really, when you think about it. And by the way, the one last thing I want to bring up in that before, one more detail, which is we also see in the flashback at the very, very end of this episode that she is handcuffed inside of this closet. There's a horrible thing, obviously, that's happened to her when she was young. She flashes back to this during the blowing out of the birthday candles. Like there's that stark cut from the birthday candles to the burning bed is like really shocking. When she gets released, she exits and then she gets blood spatter on her face. So something else happened in that room that we don't even know about yet.
Very interesting. I did not notice the blood splatter, so thanks for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she's not only out of the closet, but she actually gets blood spatter. So I think you hear a gunshot as well. So
Because,
did the mom shoot
yeah,
somebody, or did the mom attempt suicide? I'm not sure.
well, there was a detail that people did die.
Yeah,
And I just assumed it was from the
from
fire that she
fire.
lit. Other people died, but maybe there is more to it. Yeah. But just going back to that birthday party, I mean, how many
Yeah.
birthday parties have you been to where there's all these issues swirling with the parents or
Yes.
with friends, but you have to come together and sing happy birthday to the
Yeah,
innocent
exactly.
child?
Mhm. I love that when that's represented in movies and TV shows, by the way, when you see everybody's like bickering and bickering and nitpicking, and it could be like a political argument like that's going on. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, happy birthday.
Yeah.
Like
Gotta
snap
sing now,
to
gotta sing.
all things stop. All the infighting stops immediately. Happy birthday. And then you kind of say your goodbyes after the cake gets cut, I guess.
Once you've had the cake, you can leave.
Or unless you're her brother here who drunkenly it's just like really not generous to him at all, to her I should say. He's just you got to cut. I mean, that's not the way to approach things, especially when the mom is an addict and you come at her when you're all drunk. Yeah, I don't think that's the right approach.
Drinking straight from the tequila bottle. Families like, yeah, parents and kids. The kids get the parents' problems, of course.
Absolutely, unfortunately for them. We try to get a little bit better each generation though, right?
We really do.
Yeah, I do. The other thing I wanted to touch base on here, which is interesting that they're also developing here. Another reason I kind of like this episode is this continuing development of seeing Calderon. In a way, they're showing her as another side of the coin to
Gudson, Dave.
Dave Gudson. They kind of show her as another side of the coin to Gudson. They're both bending the rules. They're both tenacious investigators, and she's wants any reason to prove herself right and to do achieve what she's trying to achieve. In a way, his is like this twisted version of that, right? As well. I mean, when you're setting the fires, obviously you have crossed the line, but when you think about her last week, make it look like she was shooting in self-defense when she really had no reason to be there other than wanting to prove that guy who she didn't like was the arsonist. There's some parallel being drawn here, that these two characters are not that dissimilar. Although, as far as we know, she's never crossed the line like that before.
Yes, well, that's all the cat and mouse game, isn't it? And they are. I mean, you could say that she did cross the line and making up that whole story, just to get her man, and then he's on the other side of the line. He's lighting this fire. Are we led to suspect that he lit the BMW convertible fire as well, even though he went off without a limp?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is him. Yeah, we should actually spend a moment on that as well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's him there as well. He's doing this. I forget where it is during a conversation or whether it's during his writing process, where he's saying that the DNC arsonist needs a new modus operandi, basically, and he even throws it at her, going like, "Oh, it doesn't fit the profile," and she's like, "Well, other things, aspects of it do," but it seems like he is intentionally in other words, it doesn't even seem like he wants to cover up the fact that this is DNC. I think he wants to change the profile a bit, just to shake things up in a way. It's like it really feels like he's playing a game with her at this point.
It really does. Like in the last episode, we saw he had to light the fire because of his family troubles.
Right.
Whereas this time, it seems like he just wants to keep the game going with her and to pull her in different directions.
Yeah. At this point, obviously, if not for nothing, but I mean, if he's going to go to another convenience store and set another fire, and he wants to keep setting these fires, which I assume he does, not only does he want to change up the profile to see if she can, track that this is the same arsonist shifting their profile. I think part of that is the game, but the other part of it is, I mean, convenience stores have cameras, and if everyone's looking for this guy, it's not too long before someone's gonna catch him on camera in the parking lot and get his license plate or get his face. So he can only get lucky so long, especially when everybody's looking for someone who looks like him and limps and whatever else, right? Especially the limp. Think about the limp. Like if the limp, he's trying to sell the limp as a real thing, then he's going to have to limp every time. I mean, any guy in a brown jacket walking into my convenience store with I'm not letting him in. Like that guy doesn't get in here. Do you see that guy with the brown jacket limping? He doesn't get in here. That's it. Lock him out. But yeah, so I think he also knows that it's just a matter of time before he'll get caught, or minimally that everyone's going to start be able to identify him pretty quickly. So some of this is just practical as well as him trying to play this game with her. And of course, can he? I mean, this is all part of his ego trip, right? Can he continue to set these fires when everyone's literally looking for him, right? Especially if she suspects him. If he kind of thinks, I think she suspects me and I can keep doing this, what a power trip that would be, right?
Exactly. Yes, that's why he's doing it, for power and control.
For sure. All right. So next week, we will probably only spend a little bit of time on the next episode, but we will continue to talk about Smoke because next week, primarily, I think we're going to be talking about MurderBot, which is wrapping up.
Yeah, I'm up to date with MurderBot. I can't say that I think about it a lot
Right.
after watching it, even though it is a very enjoyable show. Yeah, we'll have to gather my thoughts for the next conversation about it.
I think it really depends on how that they land the finale. So I'm very curious to see, and I guess we'll decide there. And of course, almost certainly we'll be having a conversation about Superman. Are you having? Does Amazon do these early screeners in Australia by chance?
I do get a couple of little emails from them about this type of thing. Yeah.
Amazon is doing early IMAX screenings for Superman. I think tomorrow. When I was up in with my wife's family, I actually went to the Amazon link and I looked at the IMAX screen. There might be other window locations, but the IMAX screen, the one I told you about, where I saw the F1 movie, they have 10 seats available. It is the front row of the IMAX theater. I'm like, I don't know if I want to sit all the way in the front row, but maybe I'll just have to see it with everybody else. But if I can see one of these early screenings and get an actual decent seat, I might try to see it early. But yeah, I'm pretty certain to try to watch it by the end of the weekend, and maybe we can discuss that as well if you get a chance to see it. If not, I mean, between MurderBot and Smoke, I think we'll have plenty to talk about. Oh, and maybe even talking about the first episode of Dexter. So that's pretty cram packed.
I just don't know if I can find people to go to the cinema with me all the time. I mean, I want to watch these things. I'm very interested. I mean, James Gunn's Superman, it could go either way. So,
Sure.
yeah. So I'm very interested in seeing what he does with it. But geez, DC have had a tough run
Real rough.
over the last 10 or so years, especially with the Superman character. So it'd want to be very different to what's come before, and also be. I don't want it just to be super cartoony as well, like some of those James Gunn films have been. You know, you want it to be pretty hard hitting, because it's the original superhero. So yeah, I'm keen. I just got to encourage someone to come with me. Otherwise, I'll just go by myself.
I go solo. I got to tell you. I mean, I gave up on that so long ago. I would always be like, "Oh, I didn't get the chance to see that. Didn't get a chance to see that." Even when I was doing the podcast, because I was like waiting for someone, and I'm like, "They're not coming." I'm gonna watch them. I get to see, like, sometimes I get early previews, but sometimes I'll just go like on a Thursday preview. They always preview the night before. Sometimes 2 days earlier they do these late night previews. I buy a ticket and I'm on my way. Not waiting for nobody. So yeah, that way I always get to see them.
Good.
All right, have a good day. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Victor. Cheers.